I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 127 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Status of Women. I would like to remind all members of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name prior to speaking, and a reminder that all comments should be addressed through that of the chair. Merci à tous pour votre coopération. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, September 25th, 2024, the committee will now commence its study of gender-based violence and femicides. Before we welcome our witnesses, I'd like to provide the trigger warning. We will be discussing experiences related to violence and femicides. This may be triggering to viewers with similar experiences. If indeed you feel distressed or need help, please advise the clerk. For all witnesses and for all members of Parliament, it is important to recognize that these are very difficult discussions. So let's try and keep our conversations as compassionate as possible. I would also like to note out that in order to have an efficient and organized meeting, I will be indicating when you have 1 minute left and then when you have 30 minutes left, just to keep us on point. Sorry, 30 seconds, not 30 minutes. 1 minute and 30 seconds. And additionally, just a reminder to the witnesses that we will not be, and to the members, that we are not able to show any props during our testimony and our questions today. For today's panel, as an individual, I would like to welcome Alison Irons by video conference. In addition, we have Megan Walker, advocate to end male violence against women. Representing End Violence Everywhere, Kate Alexander, founder. Representing Safe Center of Peel, Shalina Jashani, Director, Strategic Partnerships and Collaboration, joining by video conference. And from Women's Shelter Canada, Anurada Dugal, Executive Director, joining us by video conference. At this point, we will begin with our opening statements. Ms. Irons, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the committee for having invited me to speak today. By way of introduction, I'm an ex-RCMP officer of 9 years service who attended many so-called domestic disputes during my service, and also at that time was on the board of the North Shore Women's Centre in North Vancouver, BC as a police advisor. I've also worked as an Ontario government investigator and investigative manager for Ombudsman Ontario, primarily in the field of corrections, and I retired as a government director of enterprise-wide services. Further, I'm certified as a Canadian Human Resources Leader, or CHRL. Sadly, I'm also the mother of 26-year-old Lindsay Margaret Wilson, born the 30th of July, 1986, my precious daughter and my best friend, who was stalked and shot to death by her ex-intimate partner, a legal gun owner, who never should have been granted a license, in a murder-suicide on April 5th, 2013, in Bracebridge, Ontario, just 2 weeks before completing her graduating exams. I accepted her degree from Nipissing University posthumously. I want to emphasize to the committee that my daughter's assassin had never been violent with her until the day he murdered her in cold blood. He was clean-cut, articulate, and from a well-to-do family of professionals in the community where he lived. He was also manipulative, artful, and controlling with my daughter in a number of ways. He'd tell her she was the love of his life, but would undermine her self-confidence by constantly criticizing her looks, her weight — she was slim, not overweight — her clothing choices, etc. She left the relationship twice when she caught him drug dealing behind her back, another manipulation as he was not the person he purported to be. The first time, he lured her back with letters articulating his love for her, his apologies, and the inevitable promises of changed behavior. Occasionally, he
We're frozen. Ms. Irons, you are frozen right now, so I don't know if you can hear me, but we will suspend briefly while we fix it. will proceed to our next witness, just in the nature of time. There is approximately 2.5 minutes remaining in Ms. Iron's testimony, so we will circle back with her. But in the meantime, I would like to welcome Megan Walker, advocate to end male violence against women. Ms. Walker, you have approximately 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'm a lifelong advocate to end male violence against women. And when I last appeared before you on July 31st, I outlined how dire the situation is for women and girls in Canada. I spoke about femicide and told you that between 2019 and 2023, 840 women and girls were victims of femicide. That number continues to increase and will do so until it is recognized as a criminal offense. Femicide must be named as an offense in the criminal code. Naming femicide will help families heal. It will help with data collection, and it will help raise community awareness, which is so desperately needed, so that the community knows what questions to ask if they suspect a woman is being abused. I was an affiant in the 2023 Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Reform versus the Attorney General Superior Court case. Superior Court Justice R.F. Goldstein wrote in that decision that some of the women and girls report being tortured, gang raped, mutilated, whipped, and waterboarded at the hands of their sex purchasers and exploiters. He further wrote, the violence employed by exploiters can include aggressive grabbing, open or closed hand strikes, kicks, choking, or burning of victims using cigarettes or curling irons. The violence can lead to significant visible injuries and can also cause death. We live in a country where, due to the failure of government to act, it appears that some in government may consider women and girls to be nothing more than objects to satisfy the porn-fueled fantasies of men. While Justice Goldstein used the term sex work, I do not refer to any part of the commercial sex industry as work. It's not work. It's torture and can lead to femicide. Non-state torture must be added to the criminal code as a distinct crime. If we are a country that truly wants to help women and girls to be safe, we need to invest in women and girls. They need a guaranteed living income, housing, counseling, education, and other support services. And we need to stop, and men need to stop torturing, raping, and killing women. Section 15 of the Charter states that every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. Women and girls are denied these rights. We are discriminated against based on sex. We are victims of femicide, killed because we are female. We are raped, assaulted, strangled, and victims of non-state torture because we are female. Our homes are the most dangerous place we can be, a place where we are beaten and killed because we are female. We are objectified in every area of our lives because we are female. We are kept in poverty because we are female. We are denied opportunities because we are female. We are denied equal pay for equal work because we are female. We are denied justice in the legal and family courts. The courts ignore our evidence and call us liars because we are female. The government has failed women and girls. It is the responsibility of the government to promote equality by creating legislative changes that comply with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to guarantee that women and girls are equal before and under the law. My heart aches every time a woman or girl becomes a victim of femicide. Today I'm thinking about Cheryl Sheldon, Brianna Broadfoot, Tiffany Gates, their families, and all victims of femicide, including Alison Iron's daughter. Femicide is preventable. These women should be alive.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Next, I would like to welcome, representing End Violence Everywhere, founder, Kate Alexander.
Thank you for inviting me back to committee. I hope you can recall the photos that I shared in committee on July 31st, 2024, the anniversary of my attempted murder. They captured 4 hours of torture at the hands of my ex-boyfriend, who remains still an alleged abuser. He was charged 8 times, but his charter rights superseded mine. He is free without consequence. I am a survivor of intimate partner violence and a victim of the Canadian injustice system. My ex was not successful in killing me, but this country kills justice and it kills safety. This is the remainder of my speech that was not heard in the summer. A non-exhaustive list of solutions provided by survivors, lawyers, and other professionals in other industries. 1, declare IPV, an SA, and femicide a national state of emergency with increases of 68, 75, and 27% respectively. This is very fair. Legislate and define the term femicide in the criminal code. Include men and male identifying persons in ending male violence against women. Lawyers should be made available for victims pro bono before they report to the police, as we have an institutional culture of victim blaming. Immediately hire more trauma-informed judges and court staff with mandatory in-person training and updates about new legislation. Have police available at all times to take statements from an IPV or SA victim. Violent offenders must be held in custody until trial or on house arrest with ankle bracelets. There should be a zero-tolerance policy for any abuser who breaks bail conditions, and he should be immediately held in custody. Create a registered IPV offender list. We have one for SA, and we desperately need one for IPV starting at 16 years of age. Publicize this list on a website to protect women and girls. Name offenders publicly immediately. Femicide is not a private issue. Never use restraining orders, undertakings, and peace bonds in egregious crimes that involve deadly force. They are not a solution. Bails must be increased and scaled to the income of the abuser. Actually enforce bail conditions, and any surety must pay the amount up front and forfeit it if the perpetrator commits another offense. This money should then go back into a fund to support survivors directly. Abusers who put meritless claims in the legal system should face severe penalties and criminal charges, including penalties for perjury. Have absolutely zero discrimination about sexual orientation, length of relationship, race, or any other form of discrimination about a victim's. Abuse is abuse. All abusers who are convicted of any type of SA or IPV must complete in-person abuser program regardless of the intensity of the crime. Amend Chapter 11B of the Charter Rights, perhaps with Bill 392. There should be no time limit or stay permitted with human-on-human crimes. Reformative justice is to never be utilized without the survivor's consent. Re-educate victim services. As in its current state, it is re-traumatizing and not safe. Do not revoke gun laws that protect victims and survivors. Survivors' privacy should be protected from abuse. There should be no NDAs or subpoena of personal information, i.e. Section 278 of the Criminal Code. Provide criminal trials within a 90-day period. No more waiting years and years on end. It should be mandatory that every province and territory have a cabinet office dedicated to IPV, SA, and femicide. Funding should be available to support survivors in transition out of abusive environments with CPAs and other financial advisors. Victims should not have to pay for their own transcripts online. Restorative justice should still allow for a victim impact statement. Abusive fathers should never have access to children ever. Make the punishment so severe that abusers will think twice, and when they do proceed to abuse, actually follow through in condemning them to life sentences and stop condemning the survivors. Act urgently. We continue to lose innocent women every single day. And honestly, we really need your help. Provincially, the NDP has been very vocal in supporting survivors, and federally, the Conservatives predominantly support us, save for a few nonpartisan leaders who are actually putting people over politics. This clearly means that the harrowing issues that survivors and victims face, that they are not being listened to by the current governments, but only by the opposition parties. It also means that these issues are very explicitly nonpartisan issues, so stop politicizing our fundamental human rights. We need to stand together, especially as women, especially the people in this room. It costs Canada over $8 billion a year to deal with the aftermath of IPV alone, when we could be preventing it with those funds. Prevention is worth more than the cure, and prevention is the only cure for femicide. I'm getting told that I have 30 seconds. Brittany Berry was stabbed to death on Thursday in front of her children right here in Ottawa. It cost her everything. The cost for her children is immeasurable. This is the Status of Women Committee, and the status of women in Canada is terrible. Stop kidding yourself, stop lying, stop pretending. This type of behavior is exactly what abusers do. The hardest part is knowing that no amount of awareness, laws, or funds can bring back those who should have been survivors instead of victims. But I cannot stand to lose another human being needlessly based on bad policy. Supporting survivors supports the community, but please do not mistake our kindness for weakness. We are not going away. The more you turn survivors away, the more we will band together. The more you try to silence us, the louder we will become. And the more you ignore us, the more visible we will be. Will you stand on the right side of history?
Thank you very much, Ms. Alexander. Next, representing Safe Center of Peel, Director of Strategic Partnerships and Collaboration by video conference, Shalina Jashani. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Shalina Jashani, and I'm the director of the Safe Center of Peel, which is located in Brampton, Ontario, serving the region of Peel. I've had the privilege to address this committee on several occasions and convey my gratitude for today's invitation. I would like to begin by acknowledging the many survivors who have shared courageously their stories, and I want to remember the women we have lost in our country as a result of gender-based violence. Femicide is the intentional killing of women, girls, and gender-diverse individuals based on their gender, regardless of the relationship with the perpetrator. This can occur in various contexts, including intimate or familial relationships, or even when the victim doesn't know the perpetrator, such as in cases involving strangers. The unifying factor is the gendered motivation behind the killing, which distinguishes femicide from other forms of homicide. Globally, women face disproportionate risks of gender-based violence, often ending in murder, solely because they are women. The data on intimate partner violence in Canada reveals a disturbing prevalence, though IPV continuously remains underreported. In 2023, Peel Regional Police alone responded to 9,570 IPV calls, with 486 of these cases involving strangulation, a clear indicator of escalating violence and heightened lethality risk for victims. In 2023, Ontario Association of Interval and Transition Houses reported 62 femicides in Ontario, of which 7 of them were from Peel Region. The Ontario Domestic Violence Death Review Committee has identified femicide as both predictable and preventable, consistently highlighting common risk factors in cases that lead to femicide. To prevent these tragedies, the committee frequently recommends enhancing risk assessments, strengthening safety planning, and expanding community-based support services. Additionally, they emphasize the importance of cross-sector collaboration, bringing together law enforcement, social services, healthcare providers, and community organizations to build a unified response to intimate partner violence and better protect those at risk. The Safe Center model can play a crucial role in preventing femicide by providing a comprehensive, trauma-informed, and survivor-centered approach to addressing GB violence. The Safe Center is an innovative, evidence-based, best practice model of how a community can work together to respond and provide a safety net for victims of IPV. The center has been in operation since 2011 because of the commitment of our 24 community partners led by Catholic Family Services Peel Dufferin, who together provide an integrated and coordinated service delivery model. As I have presented in the past, it took community organizations and the voices of survivors to dismantle the silos, coordinate our service system response, and provide holistic and integrated care. Survivors told us that they did not want to have to repeat their stories over and over. They did not want to be told that they couldn't bring their children with them to these different services, and they often just gave up trying to travel from place to place to navigate a complex system they didn't understand. They didn't know where to go for help and what was really available for them. We were losing our early intervention opportunities. The Safe Center recognizes that cross-sectorial collaboration among human services are vital in responding to survivors of IPV. By providing a safe, confidential space, women experiencing abuse can access essential resources before violence escalates to the point of femicide. We understand that intimate partner violence does not begin with femicide. Instead, there are warning signs and patterns of escalating violence. At the Safe Center, our partners are trained in risk assessment using a validated tool that allows us to approach risk in a unified, clear manner. This shared framework enables us to develop tailored safety plans that reflect each woman's unique circumstances, ensuring we meet each client's specific needs effectively and consistently. Our cross-sectorial partnerships allow us to create a service system for her and her children that is accessible. Following our recommendations for your consideration, need for public awareness campaigns to educate Canadians about femicide and gender-based violence. The goal should be to raise awareness to support early intervention and prevention. Recognize femicide as a specific crime under the Canadian Criminal Code. Adding femicide as a legal term would highlight the gendered motivations behind these killings. This would provide a foundation for collecting accurate data and ensuring focused interventions. Mandate training for health professionals, judges, and law enforcement on recognizing intimate partner violence and the warning signs that can lead to femicide. Integrated models like the Safe Center consistently demonstrate their effectiveness and impact. For this model to expand and remain sustainable, needs dedicated funding, specifically for these cross-sectorial service systems. This is essential. Thank you for the opportunity to share the work of the Safe Center of Peel and for your commitment to address gender-based violence. I'll be happy to take questions later. Thank you.
Thank you kindly. Next, I would like to welcome from Women's Shelters Canada, and Yurata Dugal, Executive Director.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members and fellow witnesses. I'm joining you today. Temporarily, I'm in the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples in what is now known as Vancouver. Women's Shelters Canada is a national organization with a membership of 16 provincial and territorial associations. We run a national searchable website for anyone in Canada to find a shelter near them called sheltersafe.ca, and we are connected to over 600 Violence Against Women, VAW women's shelters that support survivors. We support these shelters. Femicide is on the rise. We now commonly say that one woman is killed in Canada every other day and killed by a male partner once a week. Last week, as we've already heard, the name of this victim was Bertie Berger, stabbed to death in front of her 2 children at a park in Ottawa on Thursday. We need danger assessments for every woman. Every woman connected to a service should undergo a danger assessment. Shelters frequently see this danger, they recognize the level of risk and act accordingly. In some cases, these are misunderstood or ignored by other social services so that a woman is not adequately protected. Some of the signs we've heard about today but include damage to property, harm to companion animals, verbal or physical, psychological abuse that includes coercive control are also red flags. It is true that there will not always be physical violence, but strangulation or choking is a factor, as is the presence of firearms. These are all considered within a danger assessment, but not always recognized as a threat of femicide by all services. There is a clear link between femicide and IPV, intimate partner violence. The vast majority of perpetrators are men, and with these known risk factors, we also know that there is an increased level of danger when a victim decides to leave. The most serious IPV cases should be reviewed by a collaborative group of services with a wraparound protocol, including health, children's services, law enforcement, shelters, education, all social services, with a view always to protecting women and their families. Women are not believed, and sometimes women's services are not believed. Danger assessments can be played down. We need to change this and always believe women. This is what saves lives. We need a funded, robust emergency transition housing system. I recently visited a shelter in a small town in southern Alberta. They receive 1,500 calls a year, but can only manage to directly house under 350 of those women in a community of around 100,000. This is a huge turnaway number, and there is a point at which this becomes another serious danger to femicide. As I said, shelters are able to assess danger and safety plan accordingly, but if we do not have enough beds or emergency beds for women, until the shelter is funded fully as a whole, we cannot support every woman who needs it, where and when she needs it, for as long as she needs it. That is what will keep women safe. In addition, the housing crisis is impacting femicide. We need safe, affordable housing for every woman. Women are staying longer in emergency shelters because they cannot find safe housing. When they do find it, they are still at risk. I recently heard about a case where the police had informed a woman in the community that her abuser had found out where she was. She had left that abuser safely, transitioned through a shelter, found private safe accommodation. She did not want to leave her safe housing because of the impossibility of finding that again. The risk of losing her home again and again puts her at even greater danger because of the volatile, unreliable, and worrying housing system. We need a stronger system for collecting national data on femicides. We lack clear, definable, consistent, agreed upon protocols across Canada through all health, legal, policing, and social work jurisdictions. With these data, it would be easier to know how to intervene, what multiple signs to look for, what can be adapted to different communities, because not all femicides happen in exactly the same way. I've highlighted 4 key steps: coordinated danger assessments, improved shelter funding, better affordable housing, and disaggregated data. I also encourage you to consider the full recommendations of the Mass Casualty Commission and the National Action Plan on Violence Against Women and Gender-Based Women. We owe it to every woman and families to do better. And for that, I thank the committee for taking time to study this issue.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dugal, for your testimony. At this point, I would also like to acknowledge that Ms. Irons was not able to successfully connect via video conference to finish her testimony, so we will attempt to get her as a witness either Wednesday or the next meeting. So just be mindful of that when we are posing questions. So indeed, thank you all for your opening remarks. At this point, I would like to move to our first round of questions. We will begin with Dominique. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, ladies. I will give you a couple of seconds to put on your headset, and please let me know when you're ready. Yes? Can you hear me? Do you have interpretation?
Just while we're sorting out interpretation, we will pause for your time and make sure that all of the witnesses have the correct. So I'm going to suspend for 2 quick minutes.
Est-ce que tout le monde m'entend? Madame Alexander, est-ce que c'est correct pour vous?
This is a second test. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me in English?
No, it's as loud as humanly.
As chair, perhaps I should have done this right at the onset of asking the witnesses questions. So maybe just for the purpose of everyone's understanding. So I'll have Dominique speak in French, just casually for a minute to make sure we're good.
Oui, alors, je suis partie de
Yes.
Lévis très tôt ce matin.
So I left from Lévis very early this morning. It's quite cool. Yesterday we had snow. We had beautiful snow in Quebec City. Can you hear? Can you hear me, Madame Alexandra, Madame Walker? Yes?
Moi, je suis meilleure en politique que Madame Météo.
I'm better in politics than in the weather. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to be with us this morning. Hello, dear colleagues. It's not an easy topic, so difficult. This is not the first time we deal with these issues in committee. Every time, I'm just so shocked to hear these stories that you are sharing with us. I did a short research this morning in Quebec. In Quebec, since January 2024, we have already had 20 femicides in Quebec only. I don't know what you think, ladies, but when I go out, I'm always hyper vigilant, always. And I'm not sure that men feel this. We are in a dark corner in a parking lot. We're not comfortable. There are a lot of situations where we're very, very uncomfortable. And unfortunately, for nearly 10 years now, violent crimes have increased a lot in the country. We'll have an opportunity to address this later. First question.
Madame Walker,
Madame Walker, you gave us a very dark, you painted a very dark picture of the situation. I would even say it's depressing, what you're describing. Are we facing a pandemic? Would you call this situation as being like a pandemic?
Sorry, is the last part, would you call this a pandemic?
Oui.
Yeah.
Est-ce que vous considériez actuellement que
do you consider right now that look at the femicide in Quebec, 20, the year is not over. In Canada, some ladies gave statistics which are very worrisome. I've read in some documents that we were given. Some people are talking about a pandemic. Do you share this point of view?
So we can call it a pandemic or epidemic, as many of the provinces are starting to call this. It is a very serious issue, which unfortunately the government has chosen not to address. So, you know, women do not have equal rights in Canada. And that is a tragedy because women have so much to offer. And in many cases, women are killed before they even make it through their teens. So I do present a dire situation. As I said at the outset, this is a crisis. It's something that needs to be addressed immediately. We who are survivors around this table have the solutions, and we need to be heard, and action needs to be taken as a result. And some of us have identified the actions that need to be taken, and in fact, many of us have identified the same issues. For instance, femicide is preventable, but communities don't know how to prevent femicide. They don't know what questions to ask. There needs to be public awareness because we all have a role to play in ending male violence against women and ending femicide. It's the same for me when we speak about the rights that women do not have. Women don't have the right to walk through their communities safely. And as you say, when you get out of your car, you're looking around. That is what all women do. And, I really want to reiterate that the most dangerous place for women is in their homes.
Pourquoi? Pourquoi c'est la maison, c'est l'endroit le plus dangereux?
Why at home? Why home is the most dangerous place? Is it where a woman is more confined because all spouses, all husbands are not dangerous, and we have to say that? Why do you consider home to be the most dangerous place?
Well, a home is where women are sometimes trapped with their abusers, and it's secluded. You know, the community doesn't look into people's homes. And so it's very easy for men to abuse women in their homes. And it doesn't take much to trigger an attack. So a woman may say, I'm going to the grocery store, and the next thing you know, he's outraged because she didn't ask to go to the grocery store. She's told him.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Walker. C'est très instructif.
Thank you very much, Madame Walker. It's very enlightening. There's a lady earlier who also mentioned the need to put into place a communication strategy and awareness strategy. I think it would be a good idea. It is in this committee here that I learned that when we reach the stage of strangling your partner, the next step could be a death. So these are things that we ignore. I would have liked, Madame Jachani, to tell you about this introduction to the criminal code that you would like to see, to put the term femicide and to explain it within the criminal code. Maybe another colleague will ask you the question, but it will be interesting to how to include femicide in the criminal code would add a extra value. How would it legally speaking, I'm not a lawyer, but if you have the opportunity, I would like to hear your opinion on this. Otherwise, to send us the answer in writing. Thank you very much.
Pam, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you to all our witnesses for being here today. I want to start talking about the impact that femicides have on children and youth. As you probably know, there was just a report that 1 in 5 victims are under the age of 18 in the last 18 months. And as you know, Ms. Walker, we worked together on getting Kira's Law passed. So it's children of women who are abused, but it's also young women themselves. I see lots of heads shaking. I'm just wondering if maybe Safe Center Peel, you can start, and then I think I'll go to you, Ms. Walker, if that's okay.
Absolutely. The impact on children witnessing violence in the home is profound. And children have various impacts depending on their development age, depending on their proximity to the violence. Their mothers are most times the main caregiver, and the impact that has on witnessing that type of violence. The impact of femicide on children is profound. We've just have children and youth who've lost a parent to the worst form of violence. And usually it's the other parent who has caused that violence to happen. So the ripple effects are profound on their mental health, on their adjustment, on their ability to continue to become their full potential. We have a lot of.
I want to give Ms. Walker an opportunity as well, but also it also means that sometimes children are killed as a result of the femicide as well, where the woman who's been abused is killed and the children are killed in the same act. Did you want to add to that?
Outline a story about Brianna Broadfoot, who was in London, Ontario, a 17-year-old girl, who was trying to leave a man, and he viciously attacked her with a knife through her head and other parts of her body. He killed her, and what was so sad on top of that was the preventative nature of the killing. It was preventable. And that young woman left a brother behind and her mom and dad, who are devastated, as you can imagine. You cannot bring children back. If they are killed, they are gone. And the criminal justice system continues to fail these women and children. In Brianna's case, he had previously assaulted her, putting her into the hospital in that case as well. And the police laid appropriate charges, and it went before the courts. And rather than this monster being held, he was released back into the community, where he found his way to Brianna and killed her.
And on that, I mean, the administration of justice is provincial, and I know that you advocate with the provincial government as well, but the bail conditions are set by largely provincially appointed judges who administer the bail conditions. So, I mean, it's an issue. It's a huge issue because we hear it time and time again. I mean, I just have about a minute and a half left. One of the things that, this is to Women's Shelters Canada, you advocated for, and we included in Bill C-21, provisions to ensure that firearms are removed in a prohibition order and in other circumstances. And I wonder if you could just talk about why that's important.
Absolutely. So many abusers, when they have access to firearms, will use them against, sometimes it starts with threatening the use and then eventually leads to lethal use of firearms. It is required that anyone with any kind of charge of domestic violence have their firearms removed. However, we know that the process of removing those firearms from individuals is extremely hard. And while a firearm license might be removed from an individual, it is harder to remove all access to all firearms depending on what kind of community that individual is in. Firearms licenses can also be suspended if an officer suspects that this is happening. But as we know, women are very rarely believed. And so the idea in some cases that working on something that is a suspicion may not be the first priority of law enforcement officers.
Threats. Are firearms used as threats under coercive control in these
They are.
situations?
Absolutely, they are. Firearms are used. They are, women are shown weapons. Weapons are pointed at them. Firearms are sometimes everybody knows where the firearm is in the house, and simply just looking in that part of the home is a threat to a woman that she knows exactly what that means.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I would like to welcome Adrienne. You have 6 minutes.
I invite you to put your earphones on, if you don't mind. I hope you hear me. Dear panelists, Madam Dugal, thank you so much for being here with us today. One of my first questions will be to Madam Walker and Madam Alexander. And I am very happy to see you again. Happy in the sense that I am glad that you once again have an opportunity to express yourselves here in front of this committee. And my sympathies to Madam Irons. I wanted to hear you, and I understand that as a mother myself of a little girl, what it must mean to understand that one's daughter has been the victim of intimate partner violence. Yes, this is highly emotional. What you have said was slightly different than what you said earlier on this summer. And if you'll allow me, I'll come back to some of the questions that I had prepared last time that you appeared in front of the committee. Madam Alexander, this month, last July, you talked about non-disclosure agreements as the proper procedure is one of the way that the police authorities can shut women up. So can you tell us what a non-disclosure agreement actually entails?
Non-disclosure agreements are used to silence victims over and over again. You're forced and coerced into not telling your story. They're utilized in the family court, they're utilized in the criminal court, they're utilized civilly. And there is a group called Can't Buy My Silence that is working to abolish this. Section 278 of the Criminal Code is in relation to, I compare it to the US because I can't safely live in this country because my abuser is free. In America, abusers cannot access the health records and cannot access the therapeutic records, the medical records, and otherwise. But in Canada, under Section 278, abusers are allowed to subpoena those to court. That includes all of the aforementioned, but also journals, your personal journals. So, I used to keep a journal I still keep a journal every single day. So everything that I said about my ex can be utilized against me in court from my own private book. And I mean, those aren't the most comprehensive pieces of literature, but they will be weaponized against me in court. And if I ever had a criminal trial for my attempted murder, that would have been nice. But that is what's happening over and over again. And I have two of my friends, Tanya Cooch and Alexa Barkley, who are working on this issue on survivor safety matters. We know each other. We're all friends. But Tanya actually stayed her own charges because she did not feel comfortable having her own personal records utilized against her in court. She removed the charges. And so a perpetrator is free because she didn't feel comfortable, because they weaponize it. And I've been through the criminal, I was sexually assaulted for the first time when I was 13. Second time when I was 16, third time when I was 17, been grabbed on the street here, and I was nearly killed when I was 30. That's all in Canada. Nowhere else in this world. And I've lived in 10 different countries. So I've already been through the criminal system. It took 8 years to prosecute, and I remember my own personal records being weaponized against me. Defense counsel sits there and they throw it at you, and you are getting ripped apart on a stand when you're just trying to tell the truth, and they will manipulate, and it's terrifying. Yeah. So NDAs are used to, well, you can't talk about this, you can only talk about that. Sorry, try to keep this short as possible. But it even happened to me for my attempted murder when I got my lovely peace bond hearing. The Crown Attorney said, if you mention the other charges that have already been stayed, you might get cross-examined. So you can only talk about the 3 times he hit you before he tried to kill you. And I told her to take a hike. We're going to do this, and cross-examine me if you need to. The amount of strength it takes to have to shut down these authoritative figures when you're just trying to tell the truth is repulsive. Everything needs to be amended in this justice system. Thank you.
Talking about the reform of the criminal code, I know that I have less than a minute, but it makes me think of something. And to be in contact with my colleague from Loguet over the Jordan situation, when they say, well, after a certain number of years, we don't prosecute anymore. I'll stop there, but I want you to talk about the Jordan, because this is an important issue.
Jordan's what killed my case twice. Yeah. I was never given a criminal trial against the individual who bludgeoned me nearly to death on July 31st, 2021. And I held up those photos in this room. I know I'm not allowed to bring props, but I didn't care because you need to see it. I have my attempted murder on video. There's 40 plus photos on my phone. I can hold them up. I have a chronological report. The SWAT team, tactical team, whatever it is in Canada, came to my house. There's body cam footage of the scene of the crime, and this country charged him and would not give me a criminal trial because it went above the time. I didn't want to be here anymore because of the policies in this country. I cannot live safely in Canada. I live in Los Angeles. That's a lot of privilege. I have an amazing family. My parents are behind me right now. But I am not the average survivor story. I have survivor's guilt because how am I alive when my head was split open in 3 places? How did I send a 2-word text message to people that saved my life? But the Jordan's rules, it's sickening. It is terrifying, and it's so reoffensive. I had to leave a child in his care. And it eats at me because I will never get my day in court. And a peace bond is simply not good enough for someone who is very clearly capable of killing someone. And he will do it again. And I told the Crown Attorneys, I said, when he kills someone, the blood's on your hands. It's not on mine. And that is why I'm here today. Because that is so agreed. It's so dangerous.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Bonita, You have 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. And I just want to say to Witness Alexander that you're speaking for so many other women today that are just so grateful that you're able to share that for them. My question will be for Witness Walker. Just these words about prevention is the only cure, and that home is the most dangerous place. I'm thinking about those two things together, and I know you've been in this space for a very long time. So my questions are: what new forms of violence have you seen evolve, and can the federal government do anything to end or at least address current, past, and what's been evolving?
So there are new forms of violence, maybe not so new, but they've come to the forefront many times now, which is around women who are strangled. And what has been reported to me consistently around this is that they are strangled and into unconsciousness, and then the abuser will allow them to come back to life and do it over and over and over again. And also choking. We don't talk enough about choking, and choking and strangulation are two separate issues. And women report being choked by men, again, into unconsciousness, and sometimes choked by the man's penis because he will thrust it into her throat so deeply that she's not able to breathe. And these are some of the situations that women and girls endure. So on top of them having to look over their corner everywhere, on top of women and girls facing threats of femicide, on top of just trying to survive, women and girls have to face now, which I believe is very much related to to pornography. They experience horrific forms of strangulation and choking. And those women and girls, when they report that they will never recover from it.
So, Witness Walker, I've heard this from girls as young as 11 and 12 and 13, and they experience this harassment and threat of doing those activities to them in their classrooms when they're at school. They're being shown it at school. Could you share what you've heard about how, I'm thinking about the next generation, I'm thinking about those experiences. How is this evolving? How is this happening? And what can we do to educate?
Well, we live in a country where women do not have rights, where girls do not have rights. We can expect this to happen. I've done a lot of work with young people in the schools and outside of the schools, and I remember one time saying to a group of children, we separated the boys from the girls, and I asked the girls how many of them were dressed the way they were because that's how they wanted to dress. One hand went up. And so I said, well, what are the reasons you're dressed this way? And they explained that they brought a change of clothes to school because their parents wouldn't allow them to dress this way. But they dressed that way because they were either deemed to be invisible or, and I'm sorry to say this is their term, or fuckable. And girls reported they don't want to be invisible. So they will wear clothing and do whatever is required of them to satisfy boys because they don't want any boy to think they're invisible.
Thank you so much for that testimony. I'm going to ask Witness Dugal, just thinking about prevention and those comments about how prevention is our only cure. I know that in British Columbia there is forensic nursing. I know a number of forensic nurses in British Columbia that are regularly intervening or have intervention around intimate partner violence as well as sex trafficking. And I just wonder if you could share what are the areas that healthcare could intervene in prevention and also in helping victims of abuse.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. So healthcare has a responsibility to identify when there is someone in front of them who is experiencing the results of intimate partner violence. This could be a GP who is facing a woman who has anxiety or depression, asking the right questions about why the level of anxiety and depression is where it's at, asking questions about what is going on at home, trying to find an answer. It could be also healthcare services in emergency rooms, having protocols to understand the sorts of injuries they might be seeing and how they might be resulting in the result of intimate partner violence. It is also important that healthcare workers understand a trauma-informed approach. They cannot ask questions in any way, and they cannot. They need to understand the potential for re-victimization and harming women more by asking questions or demanding answers at a time when women perhaps aren't ready or aren't able to explain what has happened. And this is why healthcare services need to play a role in collecting evidence and making sure that things are adequately recorded so that when a victim is ready to do something, she can fall back on their information. And finally, they need to have strong referral relationships. And this is why it's so important that there is a wraparound protocol, that if a woman is coming, it's not just a case of somebody giving her a phone number when she leaves, but making sure that somebody calls her afterwards and knows how to contact her.
Thank you. At this point, I would like to open the floor to Michelle Ferrari. You have 5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses today. This is obviously probably one of the most upsetting committees and testimonies we've heard, and we've heard some pretty awful things. We called an emergency meeting in the summer, and I'm so glad to see you guys back. And you know, the reason we called it was because since 2015, sexual assaults are up 75%. Sexual violations against children are up 119%. Forcible confinement or kidnapping is up 10%. Indecent harassing is up 86.41%. Non-consensual distribution of intimate images is up 801%. Trafficking in persons is up 84%. Intimate partner violence has been declared an epidemic in 94 Ontario municipalities. In Ontario, 30 women were killed in a 30-week window. Compared with 2014, intimate partner sexual assault was 163%. We had Detective Chief Milanovich from Peel Regional Police tell us during that meeting that a woman is strangled every single day in Peel Region. And he said of the percentage arrested by that unit, roughly half of them have already been released since their arrest on bail. Madam Walker and Kate, you guys have both told horrific stories of, in particular, Brianna Broadfoot, whose attacker was walking free when he shouldn't have been. Kate, your abuser is free because of Jordan's rule, which is basically a time period lapses, so apparently your crime doesn't matter. The crime against you doesn't matter. Last week, a woman in Ottawa, in broad daylight, was stabbed and her throat was slit in front of her children. And innocent bystanders had to hold her hand and tell her that her children were safe. C-75 was passed in 2019 under this Liberal government. In 2019, almost 215,000 total victims. By 2023, that number has increased to 251,000, or an increase of 17%. Clearly, this bill has made things worse. It has relaxed bail reform. And my question to both Ms. Walker and Ms. Alexander is, this bill has allowed these perpetrators, these abusers, to walk free. Why would a victim or survivor report violence and abuse if they know nothing is going to be done? And why would an abuser stop abusing if they know there is no consequences?
My abuser was allowed out on bail the next day for $500. So I was immediately terrified. I put my family at risk. He puts my family at risk. They're brave enough to still live here. I can't do it. I've spent the last week in Toronto with my organization, End Violence Everywhere. We launched at the Canadian Fashion Awards on the 19th. We held a national rally with our nonprofit Voices Against Violence. And on 24th, the day that the woman in Ottawa was stabbed, my family and I were at a gala that I chaired. We raised $600,000 for Shelter Movers, another charity. You're leaving this up to the nonprofits when you don't listen. And we can't do it alone because it doesn't matter how much awareness and how much money we throw at things. If we don't have good legislation, we are going to die.
And that is the core of the issue. So legislation is not appropriate for as it's designed. We need to recognize, first of all, that all women and girls are potential victims of violence and femicide for no other reason than the sex they were born. And if we can't acknowledge that as we write legislation or even consider legislation, we're in trouble. And so I'm telling you, everything you say today is accurate. And what do we want to do? We want to be part of the solution. So I envision having like a core group of individuals with the government at the table making recommendations about how to change this. And I know I'm talking too long, but I just wanted to say one last thing about this. This is not about provincial versus federal. This is about women. And women have to be at the core of the issue. I don't want to go back and forth because it doesn't help. It doesn't help when I'm told, oh, that's a provincial issue. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. Just because I only have 10 seconds left. Would you like to see Bill C-75 scrapped so that the people who are abusing these women are held in bail and not walking free?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Next, I would like to welcome Sonia, who is joining from video conference. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all the witnesses for coming today and share your testimony. When Kate said we all have to find the solution, and your testimony is very, very important for that. My question is to Mr. Shani. Mr. Shani, who work in the Safe Center PL. Safe Center PL is doing very good work for all the women, but I have some very important question to Mr. Shani. Mr. Shani, in 2022, Peel Police laid 531 intimate partner violence strangulation charges in Brampton and Mississauga. We know that the strangulation has many long-term health and psychological effects on victims. Could you please tell us that your organization, Safe Center PL, is doing to support victims of strangulation? What kind of, the process you're doing?
Thank you, Sonia. Yes, as you heard from the statistics, we know Peel Police are telling us that they're seeing at least one strangulation case a day, and we know that reports to police are underreported. Since April of this year till the beginning of October, we have seen 17 strangulation cases come through our door. We've started with understanding in our collaboration that we have to have good training and good capacity building so we're all understanding the issue and we're all able to respond. So we have brought in folks from the Strangulation Prevention Institute to do training with all of us so we can start to recognize the signs of strangulation. We're asking the right questions. We're educating people around this issue. This has allowed us to now start screening folks to be asking those questions because we know that many times victims of IPV do not talk about strangulation. Sometimes the strangulation has been so bad that they have passed out. They don't remember everything. And so we have to be asking questions around what the violence has been like. What are the different acts that have been happening? We also know that women of color may not necessarily have markings on their neck to show issues of strangulation. So we've started with that training, and with that, we've now come together where we are creating a strangulation prevention protocol in our region that will be trained and instituted with all of our 24 partners so that we are all screening. We are using the same risk assessment to determine the level of risk. We're making sure people get the medical attention that they need, because we also know in strangulation cases that she may say, I feel fine. I don't feel anything, but it can be days or weeks later where there are internal injuries that actually cause death. The research is clear that we know that a woman who is strangled will be 750% more likely to be killed by that man. And when I hear, folks from the Strangulation Prevention Institute talk about strangulation, they talk about men using it with a God complex. The ability to put someone's hands around someone's neck, to be able to know that they are in ultimate power and control to stop someone from breathing and taking their life away, is the most extreme form of violence that we can ever see. And so we have to pay attention. We have to talk about it, and we have to talk about it with our young people. We started a few years back talking about healthy relationships in the schools, but we have to talk about what unhealthy relationships look like and what are those signs of violence. We have to name that. So this is some of the work that we're doing. We know we need to do much more because one strangulation a day is too much, and that's only what Peel Police is able to give us at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Shishani. Just quickly, you spoke about, I know last time, the need for cross-sectorial integration to bring community together, justice, legal, health and education services for survivors. You talk about the school program. I know the Safe Center is a good example of the integration, but what measures can the government take to foster those sorts of cross-sectoral network to support victims of the gender-based violence?
Cross-sectoral collaboration is so important because we know that when people are having to go to many different places, they're not going to go. Our needs assessment in 2009 showed that people needed to go to approximately 18 different places to get all of the services that they needed. And with young children, with language barriers, with lack of finances, with big regions being in crisis, you're not going to get to all of that. That's virtually impossible. Why have we created a system that is so difficult to navigate? So the Safe Center model, like other models, is about that integrated wraparound care where people need to just come to that one place, or a partner agency gets them there, or the police gets them there. And that one place starts the whole service system. We talk about a healthcare system in our communities, but do we have a service system to address IPV? No. It's all of us nonprofits trying to figure something out and doing this in silos. And the Safe Center model allows for all of that to come together. So we're communicating, we're providing expert services based on our functions that we need to in creating a service system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, MP Sidhu. Next, we have Adrienne. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Alexander, for your transparency. And what I retain from the answers you provided, the issue of NDAs. This is an issue that was unfortunately at the core of our concerns, or the study that we conducted here on the situation of women in sports. And we talked about the safety of women and girls in sports. And this is a study that we had here, and also the Jordan orders. And we currently have a bill that was tabled in order to put an end to this here at the House of Commons. So, Ms. Walker, you can add something else on these particular issues. But earlier this summer, you highlighted the issue of this being an epidemic. the epidemic of femicides. You mentioned this in your remarks, and you also discussed the importance of modernizing our systems. So what is it? I mean, can you maybe come back to those statements and shed more light?
Thank you so much. I think it's important to recognize that the expertise comes from women with lived experience and not from a government bill that has not had anybody provide input into it. So when I think of femicide and a femicide, you know, every week or every couple of days, whatever it is, what we need to do is name it, first of all, as femicide so that it becomes visible. We need to be able to collect data around femicide, and we need to work to help families heal. So there are a number of prongs that would be part of this. But mostly I just want to say that whether it's femicide or choking or torture, whatever it might be, those problems will continue to exist until we are invited to sit at the table on a permanent basis to help resolve the issue. The issues are so many, and the government has so far either not taken any action or done it on a piecemeal basis, which is then we're having to retrieve the motions or the recommendations from the government and undo them. And what we need to do is make sure that we're at the table, have a voice, and contribute to the conversation.
What kind of country do we want to live in? Real simple, you know? Every time I cross this Canadian border, I shake. I love this country. I have so many amazing people here, but we do ourselves such a disservice by not having a functional justice system. Yeah. We really are losing the grip on it, and feeling safer in America is a very ironic situation.
Thank you. MP Zarrillo, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'm just, some of the testimony today has me thinking about the real lack of investments from this Liberal government on this very, very important issue. So I think about, I just was Googling this, 2019, only $2.5 million over 3 years to keep children safe from online harms. In 2023, they were willing to put $50 million over 5 years towards participation for kids, but only $2.5 million over 3 years to keep children safe from online harms. And I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about some of the testimony I heard today and how important it is that we have healthy kids and healthy boys growing up and healthy women. So I guess I would like to go back to witness Jasani, who talked about some of the education that's happening in school. And I was thinking about, you know, if the federal government can have a campaign on online harms, a minimal campaign, a larger campaign on participation, getting kids out to exercise, could the government take on awareness campaign to help educate kids at school about healthy relationships?
I think education is key. We know femicide is preventable. We also know that we live in a society where violence against women becomes a closed door problem. It becomes a women's problem. We need to change that. This is a community problem that we're facing. Absolutely, we need to find different ways to bring information to communities, to diverse communities, culturally sensitively, in language appropriateness, to be able to talk about this issue. We know that there have been a tremendous amount of campaigns over the years that talk about drunk driving, for example. And why don't we have campaigns that talk about violence against women? Because this is a community problem. When a woman is killed in our community, it costs taxpayers a lot of money. It impacts.
I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of time, so I just wanted to ask, I mean, have you ever seen a federal government truly invest in a significant awareness campaign to end violence against women, girls, and diverse genders in this country?
I'm not aware of any campaign.
Okay, and I'll ask Witness Walker the same thing.
No. I've not seen that campaign,
Okay, thank you.
which is why women are dying and girls are dying, being killed.
At this
because-
point, thank you. I would like to welcome Anna. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, I want to thank Megan and Kate for your bravery in coming back after the fiasco last summer. So thank you. You should be applauded. You're very strong women. So the other thing I want to get to is a couple things. Ms. Walker, you said on September 15th, 2022, that the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, the former Minister of Justice, and the Minister of Women and Gender Equality attended a meeting to discuss the urgency of the Criminal Code definition of femicide. It's been 2 years, and there's still nothing's been done. And femicide is not a private issue. Restraining orders, undertaking, and peace bonds offer women and girls a false sense of security and a place them in an increased risk of femicide. So I want to set for the record, because I know my colleagues across the hall keep hashing that, you know, it's a provincial issue, it's a provincial law, this bail reform. Let me make one thing clear. Although provincial judges and justices of the peace are appointed by the province, they have to abide by the bail laws created and implemented by the federal government. So I understand education. I understand we have to, you know, not all men are bad. But if we don't change the laws, this issue will continue to happen. Do you agree that it is time to act now and not keep doing more research? We don't need more research. We know what's happening. Let's get her done.
Absolutely. And I can also just clarify one thing. We invited all of those parties to the meeting, but they never responded. So we were never part of that meeting with the government because it never happened. So I think that's an important point to make. And you are spot on. Time to move on. Let's stop talking about it and let's move on and make it happen. You know, and
when are we going to hold these abusers accountable?
Exactly.
They don't like it. The only thing they'll respond to is pressure. I'm not about mass incarceration, but there are certain individuals who certainly should not be on these streets. Full stop. They cannot be rehabilitated. They don't respond to, don't do that again. They do it over and over, and every time you let them get away with it, they're empowered to continue. And then they kill someone. Every time you give them a peace bond, that is their golden ticket to say, ha ha ha, I won. And they act on it. And we have to do it now. The cost to move away out of violence is about $30,000. Let's talk about the funds that it takes. It's without my parental support and my family unit and the resources that I was privileged to be born to have, I would not have been able to move to America to get away from him, and I probably would be dead. But I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones. The majority of people don't have what I have. And I recognize that, and that's why I'm here, because we have to change this. We have to. Otherwise, it's going to continue to get worse. We've had to act 30 years ago. So no more studies. I'm done. I want to move. I want to protect. I need to protect the next woman.
So can I just ask, there was I believe the comment that you made, Ms. Alexander, was that it cost $8 billion a year.
That's an unreported fact from 2009.
Okay, so let's go back a step. So the individual, the criminal, I'll call him a criminal, that abused you, has the means, obviously. So would you agree that individuals that cause that type of harm, we should seize their assets to help the victims recover?
Yes. Yep.
So if we continue to talk about the violence against women when every single day there's another victim, this is never going to change unless we can persuade the current government to change the Bail Reform Act and keep these criminals in jail so women can walk safely on the street. Would you agree with that?
I concur.
Yeah, and I would ask the question of the government, how many dead women does it take for you to recognize there's a crisis with women in this community.
Exactly. And I also want to make note that your parents are here, Miss Alexander, and I have to tell you, I'm very proud of you, of your strength and your parents' strength, because
They're lucky.
yeah. And so
They're lucky I'm here.
we're very, very proud. You stand for all women. Your strength has given me strength to carry on this fight, and I will continue that fight for both of you and for all women, because we need to change the law. I can't say it enough. We have to stop talking about it, stop researching it, change the law to make individuals understand that if in Canada, we appreciate and respect women. Right now, that's not the case.
Point about that.
I have to, if you could just incorporate that into the next person's questions into that time, that would be great. Thank you, MP Roberts. MP Ebner, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you genuinely to all of our witnesses for your testimony today. It's really important. We've been talking about bail reform and Bill C-75, so I just kind of want to go over what's in that legislation and get your feedback on what you would change. So in 2019, we created a reverse onus. So if you've been charged with a violent offense involving an intimate partner, it's on you. The onus is reversed. You have to, if the accused has to prove why they should be let out on bail. So that changed. The courts have to consider previous intimate partner violence convictions. Strangulation has to be considered. Serious forms of sexual assault have to be considered, and it involves higher maximum penalty in cases involving. So it's not the law that's wrong. It's the way that it's being implemented by
To
courts.
prove it, when it's on video, that's a problem. That's a huge problem in this country, because charter rates are good for good people, but they're not good for criminals.
We've heard today that the problem is the law. So I've read out the law, but what you're telling me, it's not the law, it's the implementation at the court level.
Well, I'm not going to go back and forth on that point. I mean, the point is, it's not being implemented. Women are being killed, and so I don't want to argue about, this or that.
I think it's important to nail down
it is
what
the law.
exactly needs to be changed.
It is the law, because if the law was working, if the law was appropriately drafted, I would not be sitting in a courtroom on an ongoing basis watching justices of the peace say, now, are you sure you won't do it again? And let him go. And it's rare.
So it's how the justices of peace are interpreting the law. Okay.
Okay, so
let me move on.
Don't say that, please. I don't accept that.
So insulting.
I think it was a poorly written law, and it needs to be changed.
In what way exactly would you change it?
My ex is free. He was out the next day after he tried to kill me, full stop.
So I think it needs to be changed after consultation with survivors, so their experiences are reflected in it, and that is missing. And I think if that were included, we would have a stronger piece of legislation that would potentially save lives.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just have a gentle reminder to speak through the chair?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
And another thing we've been talking about, we just finished a study in this committee about coercive control. And a lot of the examples we've heard today began with coercive control. We heard it, especially I think from Alison Irons before she was unable to rejoin the meeting. Her daughter wasn't physically attacked by her partner until she was killed. But there were lots of examples of coercive control leading up to that. So maybe I'll start with the Safe Center of Peel. What do you think, if we criminalize coercive control, how much of an impact do you think that would have on our incidences of domestic violence?
Well, I think there's a few things to be thinking about when you think about coercive control. One is we have to start naming it. We have to start understanding, what does coercive control actually look like, and how does it escalate to other forms of violence and yes, to femicide. So putting it into the criminal code is one way, but it's not the only way. And I think that's why we need a holistic approach when we talk about coercive control, how we're educating people in the community, how we're building capacity around service providers like healthcare professionals so that they can start to pay attention to these signs, start to ask questions, as well as judges and law enforcement, so that there is that understanding of all of these various elements. And again, it comes back to the education at the early point in those teen years when they're first starting those relationships. What is a healthy relationship? What does coercive
That's great.
control
Sorry,
look
I
like?
don't mean to cut you off. I have 20 seconds
Sorry.
left. I want to go quickly to Ms. Dugal from the Women's Shelters Canada. Our government has invested actually more than $500 million across the country in women's shelters, but we hear regularly it's not enough. How would you like to see women's shelters funded across the country?
Women's shelters need funding that is both for capital expenses, to renew their infrastructure, to build more shelters, have more shelter beds. We need to increase the number of second stage shelters, the transitional housing for longer term stays. Most shelters, 64%, have not received any kind of annual cost of living increase from their main government funder. 74% of shelters say that insufficient funding is a major challenge for them to house the women who need the work that need the services they offer. So all levels of government need to get together and fund shelters adequately.
Thank you. Thank you, MP Hebner. Next, we'll begin our third round. MP Ferrari, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. We certainly wouldn't want to bring you here and tell you how the legal system is working when it's clearly not, which is what it just feels like a Liberal member just did to you. And I think that's the whole point, right? Like it comes back to the same point that I asked you. Why would a woman or anybody who's a victim or survivor come forward when they know nothing is going to happen? And why would an abuser stop doing that if they know there are no consequences? This is all law. This is everything you've said today, Kate, is to the point of there is no consequences in this current justice system. There is nothing in place to stop someone from actively going out and murdering someone in broad daylight. In broad daylight. Like, I don't know how more serious we can get today, folks. Like, so to sit across the way with the Liberal member and to say, oh, well, let's go into the weeds here. C-75 is doing a great job. It's not. It's not working. People are dying. Let's cut it and do what is happening here. C-75 was supposed to make it better, and it's made it worse. The stats are here. That is cold, hard facts. So I guess I would turn to Miss Alexander again. And I think one of the things people don't understand is Jordan's rule. How could you have somebody who literally bludgeoned you, in your words, almost to death? You have video evidence. He's out on bail for $500 the very next day. Is that the only time he's ever served?
Yes.
And it is thrown out. The entire case is thrown out, and this guy is walking free. Explain that to people at home, because it makes no sense.
Nobody understands it, because I have spoken to judges and prosecutors in America, and they say, what are they doing? What are you guys doing up there? It's a national embarrassment. And the criminals know this, which is why they park themselves in this country, which is why Canada is 4th in the world for human trafficking, which is why we're seeing such staggering numbers into the hundreds of percent on increase. And all these stats are people. All these stats are people like me, are your sisters, or your siblings, are your relatives, are your neighbors. And currently and for so long, there has been no justice system in this country. And I'm really sick and tired of having to repeat this when it's so blatantly obvious, because I am losing a sibling, a survivor sibling, every single day. I can't handle the phone calls anymore. The text messages, the Facebooks, the emails. Hey, she's dead, or hey, he's free, or hey, he's out on bail, or I have 38 charges against him, but he gets permission to see my child. And he just raped me and impregnated me again. I'm not kidding you. This is what's happening in this country. They keep doing it because there's nowhere, you don't put them in custody.
There's no consequences. I want to ask the most dangerous time. You know, there was a bill put forward by a senator whose own daughter was murdered, and it was Bill S-205, and it was that vulnerable period of when the abuser is charged and is then let out on bail or a surety. That is, would you say, Ms. Walker, the most vulnerable time for violence and potential murder to happen?
I think the most dangerous time for that to happen is at the time of separation. But yes, the criminal justice system's failure also impacts the ability of women to seek help. So when you have a situation where somebody has been incarcerated, you know, overnight or whatever it is, and then is released, even if they're released with an order that they have to stay, you know, 25 meters away or whatever it is, we have abusers that sit on that line of the 25 meters and watch the woman come and go. She is never safe, and a peace bond is not even worth the paper it's written on. So and this is what women and girls are facing.
And that bill, they wanted to give the authority to the survivor so that she or whomever, men are victims of this as well. Let's point that out. But they took that out of the bill, that they would be notified, that they had the power and authority to water that down. And so these are the kinds of things that you have to change the law if you are going to change this. The last point I'll make is about incarceration. And, you know, we have these crazy stories of, you know, these children witnessing this violence. What are those children going to go on to do? They're going to go on to have violent relationships. Let's just call a spade a spade. If we don't have programming in place in the jails to support men to understand why they are violent, they can't be walking free because they're not capable of that. But if we don't fix our inside of our prison systems, we are going to have a merry-go-round.
Thank you. Thank you, MP Ferrari. Next, I'd like to welcome Pam. MP Damoff, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Chair. And I think everybody, witnesses and all members of this committee, agree that what's happening is not working. The level of femicides is atrocious. I was on this committee for 4 years when I first got elected, and we're still talking about it. One of the things actually that we recommended as a committee early on was a national action plan, and we didn't think we were going to get it. I think Mark Saray might have been on the committee with me at the time. We've now got $500 billion that's been invested in that national action plan, but the problem is huge. I have a request for our analysts, if I could, because a number of things have come up. And look, I don't want to point fingers at federal or provincial or municipal, because municipal is responsible for the police services who don't act properly either. But we do need to make sure that everybody is doing everything possible that they can. And, you know, the National Police Federation said, and I'm quoting here, in much of Canada, especially in Ontario, it's the justice of the peace who are order and counsel appointments, but have usually no legal practice experience as a lawyer or legal degree, who preside over almost all bailing hearings in much of Canada. So those are provincial appointments. In my region, in Halton Region, the government canceled the new jail. And do you know what's happening? Judges won't sit in Halton Region because there's mold and so when you talk about Jordan's rule, the province hasn't built a courthouse in Halton and it's crumbling, and so people are being released. So trust me, I think that's horrific that that's happening, or that the provincial jails are triple bunked and so judges won't send them to to provincial jails. Like, we all need to take responsibility for this. There is a couple things I would ask if the analysts could do a division of who's responsible for what in the criminal justice system. And also there's a StatsCan report called, average counts of adults in provincial and territorial correction programs, which actually shows year by year the number of people who are held and the number that are, the alternative is who's released in bail. And I went back and looked at those numbers. In 2010, 59% of people were being held for bail. Today it's 80%. So the stats actually don't correspond to what's happening in the justice system. And I forgot to put my timer on, Chair. Sorry, I got so emotional there.
You have about 2 minutes and 10 seconds.
Okay, but just one of the things when we studied Ronna Ambrose's bill on sexual assault, one of the things we heard is that women think that Crown prosecutors are representing them, when in fact they're representing the Crown. The defendant has someone in court. The woman often thinks she has someone in court when in fact deals are made that don't represent the woman. And I'm just wondering, and maybe you could all comment on this, is whether you think there should be support for women through the court system that is, and I think Quebec has actually done a much better job than we have here in doing their courts where these are dealt with. But whether or not women need support through the court system.
I'll answer real quick. That's what my organization does. End-to-end private advocacy based off an American model, again, because we don't have that in this country. And victim services is inefficient, re-traumatizing, and they are sponsored by the government. So I've actually sat in on Crown attorney meetings for another woman who was nearly bludgeoned to death with a hammer. And the Crown lied to her face the same way that my Crown lied to me about Jordan's Rule. And that's what we've provided, is that I said, nope, you're lying to her. Be honest. And that is literally what we do, is the end-to-end advocacy services, whether financial, medical, therapeutic, housing, you name it. We figure it out for that survivor.
And I think it's important to remember that what exists now, which is somebody from victim services gives a tour of the courthouse and does other sort of stuff as needed. But what these women need is somebody to sit with them during the entire process. And that does happen sometimes, but it's rare.
Ms. the Peel, Safe Center Peel, and then Women's Shelters Canada?
I 100% agree. Women have told us over and over again they need somebody to hold their hand. And the most difficult system to go through is the justice system. And when you have somebody who is struggling on so many different areas, there may be cultural barriers and language barriers. Having to understand the legal system is very daunting. And so having somebody hold their hand, in our community, we have victim witness assistance program, but they are so inundated with cases that they don't have the time to be able to provide as much of that support that women really need. And you're absolutely right. The Crown is not there to support the victim. The Crown has a different role.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I've been a little bit generous. At this point, I'd like to welcome Adrienne for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My goodness, I have so many questions. 2.5 minutes is so little. In Quebec, what you have talked about in Quebec is not a perfect system, but one thing that we have done is that we have gotten that issue out of politics and partisanship, and we have made a new report to rebuild trust, and this was supported by all parties who worked together with people in a spirit of collaboration intersectorially with people from justice, community and health care. So we will be able to analyze the consequences of these recommendations, especially people who are right now we're doing special tests on like electronic bracelets. And when it comes to this, we're talking about the criminalization of coercive behavior. And this, unfortunately, is the purview of the federal government. So, Madame Dugas, I know that this won't solve all problems, but to criminalize coercive control and to recognize this term and to recognize femicide, why is this part of the solutions and why do you think that we should be looking at this?
Pour vous, Madame Jeshani.
This question was for you, Madame Jeshani.
Sorry. Naming femicide is taking away the invisibility of the issue. Naming it makes us understand that women are at risk, and especially at risk by their intimate partners. And so I think that is part of the solution. It's not the only solution. We need many prongs in order to be able to address this and name this and come together as a community. I do think that education is key. I think training of those who are in power to make decisions is key. And I think legislation that names this and has clear accountabilities and consequences for those who choose to use violence to hurt their intimate partners is essential.
Merci beaucoup. Rapidement, effectivement, j'ai été marquée adolescente.
Thank you very much. There was a campaign in Quebec called "Violence is not always very striking, but it really hurts," and it's a very psychological approach. Yes. So. Madame Dugal, you've talked about recommendations in other reports. Do you have any other recommendations that you would like to make us and we will be able to include in our report? Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I just want to also point out on the question previously that I was not able to answer. There is not enough money in the justice system for women who cannot afford to represent themselves to get adequate support. The income level testing that is required is extremely low. Many women cannot afford the kind of legal support that is needed for them to go through any kind of legal service, whether it's a divorce case or an IPV case or indeed their own attempted murder. And
thank you very much, Dugal. At this point,
thank
you for that. And I think with regards to the last question that Adrienne had posed, if you could submit those to the committee, that would be great because we've already exhausted.
I have four recommendations: funding for shelter spaces, danger assessments, wraparound holistic services that include all kinds of social services, greater coordination, and a full implementation of the National Action Plan above the 5 million level that the current government has offered. We need billions, not millions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. MP Zarrillo, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm just going to follow up on that on the National Strategy Action Plan and the fact that in 2022 it was supposed to be 10 years, and right now I think we've got 2 bilaterals, one with Manitoba for 22 million and one for Saskatchewan for 20 million. But what also hasn't happened is that there has not been an annual report out of wage to track where it's at. So I think, again, I hope that this report reflects how slow the government has been on rolling out funds. I'm going to think about the Murdered, Missing, and Just Women and Girls calls to justice. Very little of that money has been spent. So money doesn't help when it's sitting in somebody else's bank account. My question is for Ms. Dugal. I'm the critic for seniors and women with disabilities, and I hear many stories that there just isn't enough data on intimate partner violence and actually family violence for women with disabilities and seniors. And I wonder if you could just share with this committee what you've seen over time in regards to seniors or women and diverse genders with disabilities experiencing intimate violence at home.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Of course, so the reason why women and diverse people with disabilities and seniors are more vulnerable to violence is because they are more isolated. They have often fewer resources. It is much easier to use multiple forms of abuse. So that often financial abuse is used against women with disabilities and seniors. as well as abuse with their the assistive technology that they might use and need, as well as abuse that is coercive in nature. So the threats of physical violence can also be much more difficult for somebody who is a senior or disabled, because they have if you like, a more delicate health system when they are facing those threats, and fewer opportunities to find help because it's not recognized. We often infantilize older people, and we take away their agency. And if we don't believe women to begin with, we believe older women and we believe disabled women even less, because we take away their rights. They're not able to express what they are experiencing in many cases. I will say that there are some programs that are specifically available for older women and women with disabilities, and having specific programs available to them is essential. They cannot be worked. You can't work with older women in a trauma-informed way in the same way. You need to have different separate services.
Thank you. Dominique, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Before I ask probably what will be my last question, I'd like to make a few comments. Do you hear me properly? Yes? Okay. So my first comment, and this is for everybody, all of us parliamentarians. I think that if we really want to solve this problem, if we truly want to advance and get some real results, we have to first of all recognize what has worked, what hasn't worked, what is working, what isn't working. And I think it is clear that we are in front of cases where things have not worked, where women have been assaulted, and where some men, because the laws have changed, are getting, Mickey Mouse sentences. We've raised questions and issues. There are criminals who are getting absolutions, getting bail that is absolutely ridiculous, and who are back home serving their sentences where they should be in prison. That is my first comment. So as a parliamentarian and parliamentarians, I think that we should be looking at this and recognize the fact that we need to do changes where changes need to happen. The second comment I have is the fact that women are being rendered invisible. We had a case in Quebec. There had been other situations that are some, because we know it's the trend of the day. Let's not take the way woman out of our laws, and let's use another word, maybe a more generic, a more umbrella term, and then we'll talk about persons. Sorry, I am not in agreement with this. And I'm really glad that this is being recorded. My third comment is for you, Madam Walker. A little while ago, you said we could have prevented femicides, maybe not all of them, but some of them. We could, and that absolutely ices my veins to know that we could have stopped them. And as a society, we did not manage to protect the women. So this is a horror. There's a horror story happening in Quebec right now, and that affects children. And something's just not right. There is a break here. And my fourth comment is for Madame Chishani. I hope I'm not massacring your name. Andréane tried to pronounce it. I did. I don't know how much time I have left, but I think I would like it if you got into more details about what you said, because what you've said has raised some huge issues. And when you've said, and other people have said as well, that we must criminalize femicide. Absolutely, I'm with you, no doubt about it. But we need the absolute, we need the narrative, we need the proper argument. We need to have something solid to say, yes, it needs to be into the criminal code, because this is what will change. Because some will say, well, femicide, homicide, what's the diff? And why do we have to get into details in the criminal code about this? No. But we, as a committee, we want to be useful. And I'm making a formal request here. Please send us the why, the how, and all of the other members of this panel. Why do you believe that putting the word femicide must be inscribed into the criminal code, and why and how is it going to improve things? How is this going to prevent femicides? So on this aspect, because I'm still not entirely convinced as to why this word should be there, I want absolute conclusions. Yes. I hope I haven't stolen your time. I do apologize.
So I just want to read into the record that Bill 75 also added a reverse onus, and I think it was mentioned for bail when an individual is charged with an offense related to intimate partner violence and has previously been convicted of an offense relating to the intimate partner violence. So how is that protecting women?
That's saying, oh, well, I'm a first-time offender. They use that against my ex. It's utter nonsense, because even with me, he wasn't a first-time offender by the time he got arrested. So stop leaving it up to the abusers. Stop leaving it up to the defense counsels. And just to comment on Ms. Vian, every single woman I know who is no longer with us, their ex-partner was out on jail. Or out on bail, sorry. Every single one. Sorry, I'm zipped my French English. Every single one. Caitlin, Brianna, Angie, Tiffany, Holly, Kelsey, in the last year, and those are the ones I'm aware of personally. It's because we're not prosecuting these offenders and keeping them where they need to be.
Thank you. MP Saray, you have the last 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Un gros merci aux témoins qui sont venus
And a
aujourd'hui.
huge thank you to the witnesses who have appeared in front of us today. Thank you so much for having come back. This is a very difficult topic, of course, and I understand the comments that have been made here about the different levels of government. The situation is very difficult, and it's not up to you, of course, to look at what can be done with the different levels of government. We know that we have to find specific solutions because this crisis must be addressed. I just want to clarify some of the comments that were made a little while ago. When it comes to the national plan of action to end gender-based violence, this was signed by all provinces and territories. There's $500 million set aside, and there's also going to be a report that will be submitted to the House in December to see what progress has been made. But of course, we understand it's not enough money. We know that 500 million is far from enough, but we need to find solutions, yes. So, Madam Alexander, a little while ago, thank you so much for the services that you render. I can't. Can you explain how the federal government could help? And I understand that provinces are involved as well, but how can we finance a system? Because in English, yes, Crown victims, we know that they're not there. Crown attorneys aren't there for the victims. We know that, of course. But we have the crisis helpline, which has been financed by the federal government for 30 million. Could we have a crisis hotline for the victims of violence that could be part of that? Could that be expanded, do you think?
This is actually something that's going on in Mexico right now, because we're going to be expanding down there too, because this issue is obviously a global problem. But there's actually a separate number 555 that you can call if you have SA or IPV or a sort of femicide against you. So that actually is a program that's being rolled out there, and I'm happy to share further details. An advocacy program is so needed, and this is something that we can talk about. We understand the step-by-step because we've lived it. I'm giving survivors a thing that I wish that I had after my attempted murder. That exact person, a friend, we're calling it a friend, we're calling it a re-entry into rebuilding life. Remove all this clinical intake client sort of jargon and have it be a trauma-informed program, and it's working. I've contacted Peel Regional, actually, had more reports made, had contacted school boards. We're helping. I've talked to a 13-year-old girl about her sexual assault and helped get her perpetrator, prosecuted properly. And we need the resources to do it. And I've relied on private funding exclusively because I have access to America. And that is not the majority of nonprofits in the US, but I've brought business people into our board to facilitate these things. But I would very happily have a discussion about how we can fund a proper advocacy program in this country so that survivors and their families feel like they are supported through the justice system.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Madame Dougal, from the Women's Shelter of Canada, you mentioned about obviously the lack of data. Can you be specific on because I mean the data's there, so I just wanted to clarify what do you mean by the lack of data, and what else do we need to collect?
Actually, the data isn't there. In very many cases, this is one of the reasons why we need to name it femicide. In many cases, when we are looking at the homicide numbers, it is sometimes very hard to identify when it is a case that a woman is being a victim of femicide linked to IPV. In some cases, the police would not ask that question. In very many cases, it takes advocates to bring it forward and say, we see this as IPV, we see this as related to violence. We want you to go back and look at it again. And there's no consistency in how the data is collected. So we need information on the background of victims, on their social location, their race, their geographic location, how many times they reported to the police before this happened. If they never reported to the police, why didn't they report? What is the family saying about what happened? What did the neighbors see? This is the sort of information we were able to gather through a multi-year government-funded research grant run by Dr. Myrna Dawson, which led to the foundation of the Canadian Observatory for Justice and Accountability. And that is why we need data, because we need accountability. We need to know also how many times is a charge laid, what happens afterwards. And it's not that, of course, that data is somewhere in StatsCan or somewhere on a police database, but we need it collected and collated for us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Suri. Thank you, Ms. Dugal. At this point, that does conclude our panel for today. The meeting commenced at 11:03, so we will finish at approximately 1:04 because we did have 1 minute of suspension as well. In addition to that, I would like to encourage or implore any witnesses that did not have an opportunity to respond to questions that were posed of them and they would like to submit additional information in response to questions that was posed of them during the meeting, they are welcome to do that. On behalf of the committee, I would certainly like to thank all of you for being here and those joining online for your very sensitive testimony. To committee members, we do have just about 2 minutes of committee business that I would like to address. A couple of housekeeping before the next meeting on mental health supports for witnesses. We have done this in the past with regards to the study of coercive behavior. And is everyone in the agreement to offer those supports to witnesses for this study? Yes. Okay. Am I seeing consensus? Okay. So there was a proposed budget that was circulated and a revised budget that was circulated this morning. Everyone we're seeing there? Okay. So the budget was circulated, and is it the will of the committee to adopt the budget as proposed? Okay. Perfect. So at this point, is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting? Okay. Meeting adjourned.